Good evening and welcome to Freedom is a Constant Struggle on this August 20th, 2015. This is going to be a difficult show for me to host because it marks not only the anniversary tomorrow, August 21st, uh, the 44th anniversary of the death or the assassination of our comrade brother George Jackson, George Lester Jackson. But it is also heretofore going to mark the assassination of our comrade brother, George's closest comrade brother, Hugo Lion Antonio Pinel, also known by his closest friends as Yogi Bear. George Jackson authored two books. The first was the bestseller, reprinted in several languages, German and French for sure, Soledad Brother, The Prison Letters of George Jackson, and posthumously, Blood in My Eye. It's remarkable that these statements are as pertinent today as they were 44 years ago. The blanket indictment of the white race has done nothing but perplex us, inhibit us. The theory that all whites are the immediate enemy and all blacks are brothers, making them loyal, is silly and indicative of a lazy mind, to be generous, since it could be a fascist plot. It doesn't explain the black pig. There were 6 on the Fred Hampton Clark kill. It doesn't explain the black paratroopers, just more pigs, who put down the great Detroit riot. It doesn't explain the pseudo-bourgeois who can be found almost everywhere in the halls of government, working for white supremacy, fascism, and capitalism. That was from Soledad Brother. And then another quote, "You must teach that socialism, communism is as old as man. It's that its principles formed the basis of mostly all the East African cultures. There was no word to denote possession in the original East African tongues. The only independent African societies today are socialistic. Those which allowed capitalism to remain are still neo-colonies. Any black who would defend an African military dictatorship is as much a fascist as Hoover. There are only 2 ways by which societies can ever be governed and organized for production of their needs: the various types of totalitarian methods represented by assorted capitalist and fascist arrangements, and the egalitarian method. Egalitarianism is people's government, and people's government and economics is socialism, dialectical and materialist. How else can societies be governed? There must be hierarchies or the elimination of hierarchies." And on that note, I'm going to introduce you to our guest via Skype, David Johnson. David was one of the San Quentin 6 brothers who, on August 21st, was one of the 6 brothers selected to stand trial for the killing of 3 guards and 2 inmate turnkeys. David Johnson, will you talk about that period, please, and what happened on August 21st?
Well, you, I guess the first thing to say, it was a period of great turmoil within the California prison system. Racism was rampant, uh, and a lot of particularly inmates of color were being set up and murdered either by other racist inmates or at the hands of prison guards. And for the most part, in those years, when I first went in 1968, up until we had some court rulings which allowed mail out to, talk about what was taking place in these institutions, it was closed. And the way I found out about it is in Soledad. And I'd not been there too long, and my mother had written me, and I wrote a letter to her, and I was talking about the breakfast, when they let us out to breakfast. When we got to breakfast, the food was cold. Well, and I sent that letter out, and 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 they kept it for 2 weeks, and they returned it back to me with a notice that you can't say anything critical of the institution.
Wow.
So for the most part, there was a strong censorship taking place, and it wasn't until after a lot of court challenges that information about what was taking place in these institutions started getting out to the public. Uh, like I said, in Soledad, I mean, there have been several incidents there uh, while I was there, and there was one incident where a brother, his name was Powell. I think Mindy mentions it in his book, The Melancholy History of Soledad Prison. Well, Powell, like I said, during the time it was closed, Powell was killed by guards, and Rubiaca was one of the people that participated in that, and he's also a witness in our case. But he had history of inflicting brutality on inmates, um, and of course the incident on the yard in 1970 where they killed Alvin Miller and Cleveland Edwards and W.L. Well, I had me and
W.L. Nolan.
W.L. Nolan. Well, all of us had some history. Me and Jug, we go back to the Youth Authority. I met him in 1963 in the California Youth Authority. And me and Cleveland Edwards used to work in the kitchen. We were in the same wing together for a while, and then he got locked up. A racist incident took place, and he got locked up. And I met W.L. when I got locked up and sent to the hole. They put me in the next cell to him, and this
Can
was
I
like,
inject? Let me inject something, David. Yogi wrote me a letter a long time ago and told me that when Cleve Edwards was locked down in the hole, and he did something so he could get thrown in the hole to go see about him.
yeah, yeah. He used to always sing a song. We'd be in the kitchen. There was a song that came out around the time. He used to say, "The judge show is funky. The judge show is funky." And I think, if I remember correctly, he had got like Sundi had been uh, convicted of an in prison incident, and that was one of the things that was keeping him in prison.
Right.
And when I got locked up in July of '69, uh, WL had sent me what we call a care package, which was, envelopes, some reading material, uh, uh, and some hygiene stuff. Because when they put you in the hole, you don't get your property right away. You just put it in the hole, just basically naked. And he also sent me a note which talked about the conditions that were taking place there. And one of the things he mentioned was, he said, "Hey, they do a lot of race talking, but we don't respond to that." He said, "But they're going to open up a yard, and probably it'll be addressed then." So when I heard about what happened on that yard, see, I already knew, but like I said, it wasn't something that I placed a lot of significance on at the time. it wasn't until after I heard what happened on the yard that I
The
really
yard of
reflected
Soledad
back.
Prison. The yard of Soledad Prison
Right,
in
right. See,
1970,
right.
January.
No, this was in '69
Oh, oh,
when WL told me that they was getting ready to open the yard.
I see.
See, so but to my understanding, what happened is they hadn't really finished it yet, so it didn't open up earlier.
I see.
See, and so by this time, I'd been transferred to a couple of other joints down south, and then to the Chino Guidance Center, then to Quentin. And when I got to Quentin in November of '69. And so I'm in B section. This is where I met Sundiata. And this particular day,
You mean Willie Tate? We call him
yeah,
Sundiata.
yeah. On this particular day, it was in the afternoon. B section, the tier I was on in B section was on the yard, and the way the B section yard is, it's kind of adjacent to the hospital, so people in certain parts of the hospital can holler to you on the yard. And so I can't remember who it was, but a brother came to the hospital window and hollered down at me and said, "Man, they just killed three brothers on the yard in Soledad." And then he was telling me, he said, "You know them, and he gave me their names, but I couldn't place them by the names because I just knew Jug by Jug,
Sweet
Albert
Jugs.
Miller by
They
Jug.
called him Sweet Jugs Miller.
Yeah, yeah, and
I didn't know Alvin.
yeah, Cleve,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and Cleveland Edwards, we just called him Cleve,
right.
and of course WL, off top, yeah, WL. And then he kept telling me, "You know him," and then when he told me the names, I said, "Damn," you know. And then later when I start thinking about it, I was saying, "Man, WL told me about the. I could have been on that yard because, like I said, when I was there, WL told me that they're getting ready to open up that yard, and I'm like, then it hits me. I could have been one of them brothers on the yard,
Yogi would have
but
been Ugo Pinel. Yogi Bear would have been on the yard had he not had to go out for something. I forgot what it was, a
yeah,
court
cause see,
appearance or something.
cause see, out when we started getting shipped out, when I came back through Soledad on my way to Quentin, I asked people, I say, where people were at, and they say, well, Jug is in Quentin. Okay, well, I'm on my way to Quentin. So when I get to Quentin, they put me in B section. I asked about Jug, and then what I find out was they had shipped Jug back down to Soledad. I said, damn, why they sent him back to Soledad? They just shipped him out of there,
Uh oh.
you know.
Yeah,
So that
conspiracy.
wasn't right, you
Yeah,
know.
sounds like a conspiracy.
Well, of course it was. I mean, everybody, when that incident took place, everybody, I mean, it woke everybody up because even the racists could see how that was a setup where only the black inmates are shot, and the only reason that the white inmate got shot, it was the result of a ricochet. He got hit by a ricochet. He didn't get a direct shot. And then, of course, let them brothers lay out there like they did that boy Mark Brown. Just let him lay out there and bleed to death.
Yes.
WL was probably killed instantly because they shot him straight in the chest. But to my understanding, the other brothers just bled to death.
And it's my understanding that WL was known as the Marvin Hagler of the prison
Oh
system.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He had hands. I mean, he was a boxing, he was a boxing contender within the prison hierarchy.
right,
You know,
right. So
uh,
they knew not to attack him, just with punches. They when they would decided to take him out, they just one
well,
shot straight to the heart.
yeah, they like I said, uh, WL, he can handle himself real well. I mean, it's one thing, to be in a cell and hear these people calling you all kind of names, because I used to, and I was when I was there, sometimes I'd hear them, and I'd be sitting in my cell, and I'd say, this person don't even know me, but if they let me out on the tier with him, you know, it's either he gonna kill me or I'm gonna kill him. And it ain't, and
Yeah,
like I said, I say, how can this person hold this kind of hostility against me and they don't even know me as a
exactly.
person or a human being? But but that's
Well,
the
we
way,
know
that's the
racist.
way the racist mind
Yeah,
works.
racism is alive and well. David, I want to fast forward a little bit and talk about Hugo Pinel, whom you knew, and he was just buried today, this morning.
Yeah,
I went to the funeral, and it was a lovely ceremony, and lots of family and friends paid tribute to our beloved hero, and he was a hero.
he was.
And I want you to talk about him, but at first I want to share um, a letter that I received, an email that I received um, today. Dear Kilu, I want to share with you the text of the letter I received from Yogi on August 13th, the day after he was killed. The postmark on it, God, I'm not good at moving this thing around on this computer.
Oh, take your time.
Okay, where did it go? Okay, the postmark on it is from August 11th, but it seems like he wrote it on August 8th. He always puts dates on his letters, so that's right. After writing Yogi since 2005, he became even closer to me through this time as his strength and supportiveness was incredible. He is an amazing person who will be missed by so many. The text is below. Thanks. In solidarity, Michelle. 8 8 2015. Dearest Sis, don't worry about the delays, but I do want you to stay more in touch during these times so we're facing them together. I'm happy to hear your second operation went well and you're feeling strong. Good to know you can travel, visit with family and friends, and hope your mom is doing well. Give my love and best always. And I'm happy for Kalima, who was recently released from prison. He'll keep doing better and better until it will feel he's been there forever. Smiley face. Sis, I'm trying some adjustment of my own, for I was let out to the main line on July 29th. I had no chance to tell anyone, so my first contact visits were with my beautiful daughter Allegra on August 1 and 2, took 2 photos. You can imagine, here's one of them on screen. You can imagine all the emotions. But wow, sis, mom came on Saturday, but no visiting allowed due to a modified lockdown. And goodness, this would have been a first contact visit. She'd only had one contact visit before. As for adjusting, don't know how long it will take because it's been 46 years since last time I was on a main line. Don't even know how I feel, but I needed to come out. 33 years clean, so I can have contact visits with mom, daughter, family, and all of you. That's the most important factor. Keep taking good care, sis. Stay positive, strong, resilient, and in touch. More love, Brother Yogi Bear.
Hmm.
So this is, and then I have a quote that's my signature, and it just popped up from Yogi. Quote, I don't ever regret speaking out and standing up for our people in here. I regret not being able to give more. Unquote. David,
Mm.
talk about our brother.
Uh, well, I always said, that George was the spokesman, the intellectual, the theorist, and tactician for our movement.
The ideologist.
Yeah, but Yogi was he was the heart and spirit of it, you know. And I mean, he was such a warm person, you know. It just emanated from him,
Yes.
you
Yes, it
know.
did.
And that, you know, like that's one of the things that that when I first met him, we fell in love. I fell in love with him, you know, because
So did I.
when they brought him from Soledad, the first chance he got, I think, well, what happened was he went out on a visit, and he was on like on the other side where George was initially. But when they brought him back from a visit, they put him on our side. Everybody was locked up. Me, Sundi, and Kaidi, Kenny Davans, and I can't remember who else was over there at the time. But he
Katari,
came
maybe?
down.
Was Katari there?
No, Katari wasn't there. Katari's
Okay.
still in Folsom.
Okay.
Um, but he come down the tier and he come down to everybody's cell, you know, and that was the first time that I had seen him, you know, and we, you know, we shook hands, embraced, and then of course later on he they put him on our side, so we did have a chance to spend some time together. And you know, like I said, this is a short period of time because this is like in July, and then August was coming up. So he spent some time with us because they had a protest because the inmate wasn't receiving his medication, and people started protesting, and Yogi got locked up and put on our side for a while, and then he went back after the cell was open. He went back on the side with George. But like you say, you know, Yogi was, you know, very close. George trusted Yogi more than he trusted anybody else. You know, and of course, conditions and circumstances being what they were, you know,
That's Yogi on the right on the screen and Katari Golden on the left.
yeah, yeah. Well, see, me and Katari grew up together. He
Oh
was from
my.
San Diego.
They killed him too.
Yeah, yeah, and we come. Matter of fact, we came in the guidance center together. Um, After they brought him back from Louisiana. But let me get back to so you know a lot of you know Georgia's trial is coming up, you know, and you know stuff is going, you know, Gibson and Justice, the thing happened on the yard. Uh, I guess you know the theory is around Gibson and Justice, and that was another case that came out was, and this happened before the 21st, was there was supposed to be there was an inmate who they believed was going to testify in George's trial, and he got, I guess, attacked on. I was locked. We were locked up. He got attacked on the yard, and they put him in the hospital, and they kept him under guard. And you know, the allegations are that Gibson and Justice killed his prison guard trying to get at this inmate who was supposed to be a witness in the Soledad Brothers case. Now, whether or not that's true or not is a whole different question. But eventually, Gibson and Justice got acquitted of those charges. But like I said, and then there was some other incidents on the yard. So tensions were between, like I said, the last part of July and up to the time that they assassinated George. A lot of stuff was being compressed in into that. You know, of course,
David, talk about the transformation, the changes that you brothers made the transformation from the criminal mentality, the knucklehead gang banging mentality, to the revolutionary mentality and the dedication to serving the people. Talk about that, please.
Okay. Well, like I said, it's George was like um, he was ahead of the curve
For sure.
in 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 this sense. Like when I came in, I mean, I had some measure of consciousness, or I was seeking it, and like I said, but that goes back to my days in youth authority, uh, predating Panthers and a whole bunch of other groups. Uh, so when I come in to Soledad, uh, the Panthers are starting to come to prominence. And matter of fact, I had a cellmate who was in the party. Um, his name was Willie Thompson. But see, I had used to be in US. So I guess the pigs thought that since this thing happened at UCLA with the
Bunchy
the
Carter
Panthers and
and
Bunchy Carter,
and John
uh,
Huggins
right? But see,
were killed.
I had been before I had come to prison. I had been disillusioned by what I had saw in us, So I just kind of like, just oh man, later for these folks ain't about. But there were some good dedicated brothers, who believed in moving in a progressive way. In even though the leadership might have been a little warped and
Right.
you
Okay,
know.
but let's.
So when I get to Soledad, uh, I get locked up for an incident, and then when I come out the hole, they put me in the cell with Willie Thompson, who was Black Panther, and everybody saying, "Whoa," but me and him became very, very close, because he was schooling me about the Panther. Now, Willie Thompson is his name. We used to call him Flex because he was built. But in the book, I think Seize the Time, he's referred to as Big
Bobby
Willie
Seale.
when they marched on Sacramento.
You're talking about Bobby Seale's book, Seize the
Yeah.
Time.
Well, the brother Big Willie that he talks about, that was uh, raising hell in the Sacramento jail because they wouldn't, deal with him right. Well, that's who my cellmate was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So before he and eventually, he came to Quentin, and before he got out, they let him come and see me. But like I said, I'm getting schooled by a lot of people who knew Bunchy Carter, Kumasi, Roach. There's a lot of progressive, but now by this time
Right.
George is coming to the line, so there is a progressive movement going on.
Right.
But George is moving it from just being progressive to a more revolutionary thing.
Right.
Because him, Jug Miller, Tony Gibson, Chili. See, George was a block worker. I was a kitchen worker. So after we finished our jobs, we could go out to the yard. So we all had this routine that when George finished his work and the kitchen workers finished their work, we all were on the weight pile together. So we'd be working out together, and sharing information and stuff. Uh,
And
and
you read a lot of books too. Some of the books that were able to
oh,
you could get in those days. You can't get anything in there now. Everything's censored,
oh,
and
oh yeah,
you can't even use George Jackson's name in a letter if you do, the brother will get thrown in. The recipient prisoner will be thrown in the hole.
yeah. See, when I first got to the AC, uh, George sent some books over to me and the other brothers to so we'd have some reading material.
Right.
And he sent me a book over, and I remember it distinctly because I reflected on it. It was the title of it was Death of a Revolutionary,
Wow.
I can't remember the author,
He
but
sent me a book list.
so so I read that book, and then of course after the 21st, when this George got assassinated, I reflected back on that book because basically what it talked about is Che's betrayal and how he got caught up in Bolivia with misinformation and being misdirected.
Che Guevara.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, that kind of like paralleled uh, what happened. I made the correlation after in looking at what happened to Comrade and what happened to Che, and said, "Wow, he sent he sent me this book, and this book kind of like parallels his death,
Wow.
you know."
I'll have to read it.
Also, when he finished Blood in My Eye, I told Sundi, I think Sundi had it because what had happened when he finished Blood in My Eye, he had the manuscript, and he sent the manuscript over to our side, and I had a chance to read it. And I don't know if Sundi remembered or not, but I think Sundi on the 21st had the manuscript in itself.
And you're referring again to Willie Tate, who's one of the six co-defendants.
Right. You know, uh, but like I said, not only did George talk about the transformation of see, his whole thing was uh, uh, the great majority of us came into prison as predators, preying on our community in one form or another. And, you know, and he was always talking about, well, look, initially, until all this stuff, initially, you know, move yourself to become, and when you leave here and go back to your community, you want to go back and be an asset to that community, help build it up, as opposed to preying on it, you
Thank
know.
you. Yes.
And of course, and then later in the game, the emphasis shifted from just being, uh, a good human being into being a revolutionary and a guerrilla.
Exactly.
Because
Because
the
when,
times called
yeah,
for that.
of course
And,
they did, because the
and
police brutality and murder of our people was just off the
exact,
charts.
yes, it was. And just like we used to say, many would be called, but few will be chosen. Which which holds true because it wasn't a whole bunch of us standing up. I mean, there was a few of us standing up, and then others were encouraged by us standing up to form that united front. And recognize that the oppressor is the administration, and they're the ones that are creating all this conflict between us, and they're the ones that are oppressing us.
Exactly. Exactly. So I'm going to go back to a quote from George real quick. Quote, so what is to be done after a revolution has failed, after our enemies have created a conservative mass society based on meaningless electoral politics, spectator sports, and a 3% annual rise in purchasing power, strictly regulated to negate itself with a corresponding rise in the cost of living? What, what can we do with a people who have gone through the authoritarian process and come out sick to the core?
All I
Whew,
can say to that is welcome to today.
really? Because we are, collectively speaking, sick to the core. We are so inhumane. We walk past homeless people every day and we have no empathy or sympathy for them. It's, we are sick.
Yeah,
And we allow these tricksters, these idiots, and I won't give them any free publicity because any publicity is good publicity. And I won't give them any of that. But these politricksters that come to you for your vote through this mainstream media that is so corrupt, it's disgusting, and this political system is corrupt to the core, and buy candidates and sell them to you and insist that you go to the polls as long as you're white, because they're doing everything they possibly can to disenfranchise all people of color, poor and all poor people. They really only want middle class white people who are racist to vote.
Yeah. You know, I remember some years ago, I think it was in Chile. Now, and this is where for me, this is kind of where I saw a turning point where people start hollering about electoral politics. Allende got elected through the electoral process, and a lot of people in the left, were saying, "Whoa, this is great, this is great,"
I remember
and
that.
and I used to write people, they would say, "Oh, this is wonderful," blah 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 blah, and I would people would write me this stuff, and I'd write them back and say, "It's not going to work." And the feedback that I would get from them was, "Oh, blah blah blah. You're basically they call me a hater because I'm saying it's not gonna work."
And George said that in an interview with Karen Wald
Yeah,
in May of 1971, March, I think, 1971. An interview with Karen Wald. He said Allende is a good man, but that's not going to work. And I
uh,
can't remember exactly what he said.
and one of the
And
reasons,
before you, and he, it was prophetic that they assassinated him very shortly after George made, a couple 2 years after he made that remark.
yeah, because all he did, they elected him, but all the generals and dictators, they still had control of the army,
Of course,
and
and the
that
military.
and
But don't forget that Nixon sent in what's his name? Oh,
they sent in a lot of people, you know,
yeah,
and then
the general, the military dude that became the next president,
Pinochet.
Pinochet.
Yeah,
Yes,
see, so all those people were still in positions of power. So like I said, and for me, everybody started hollering about elections, and ever since then, they've been pushing this thing about vote, and then you see what's happening today. The way they get around it, they redistrict stuff. Now they want you to have all this kind of ID, you know.
the
Uh,
mass incarceration. You can't vote if you have a felony, which means
yeah.
if you get out
So
of prison, you can't vote for the rest of your life.
right, so even though the you know the society is changing in terms of people of color, becoming more, how would you say, becoming more, in order for them to retain power, like I said, they doing this all in some of the southern states. They're doing this redistricting stuff.
Oh yeah.
But
Anyway,
just
any way they can to keep it. And don't forget the electoral college. A lot of people don't understand the presidential election is really a selection because you're voting for delegates that you don't even know when you go to the polls to vote for the president. And once those delegates uh, 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 assemble after all the votes are tallied, they get together and decide and cast their vote, and they don't have to honor your vote.
yeah, the what do you call it, the popular vote.
They don't
Yeah,
have to
so
honor it.
right, so they they're finding ways to circumvent being able to vote.
No president has ever been elected with a majority of the popular vote.
right. But see, the
That's
thing
never
about it
happened.
is that people are under the illusion that it means something.
Exactly.
And, and
And our people are always saying, black people will say in a minute, we fought and died for the right to vote. And they're adamant about that, especially our elders.
yeah, yeah,
But George said, quote, all political parties as things stand will support the power complex. Any individual elected will either be a supporter of the established politics or a quote unquote individual. What would help us, in fact, is to allow as many right wing elements as possible to assume political power. The fascists already have power. The point is that some way must be found to expose them and combat them. An electoral choice, an electoral choice of 10 different fascists is like choosing which way one wishes to die. The
yeah.
holder of so called high public office is always merely an extension of the hated ruling corporate class. It
You
is
know
to
what I
our.
used to say?
Go ahead,
I
David.
used to say when you vote, it's like voting for Frank James or Jesse. Both of them's crooks.
There you go. There you go. And then I love what H. Rap Brown, Imam Jalil Alamin, who they've locked under the
Yeah,
jail in solitary confinement in Florence, Colorado,
yeah,
uh, for a crime he definitely did not commit. And he said, quote, if voting could change the system, they'd make it illegal,
yeah,
unquote.
yeah,
And you know
yeah.
that's right.
You
So
know, and you know,
we have about 20 minutes left, and I really want to focus now on Hugo Pinel, and I want you to talk about who he was and how he would defend prisoners, put his life on the line in a split second if another prisoner was being brutalized. And
yeah.
I also want to talk a little bit about how the media has painted him this violent, most dangerous man in California, the most violent prisoner on earth, and all that.
Well, it's just like I said. Yogi was he would come to the aid of any prisoner, no matter what their color was, black, white, brown. He was there for them. And he put himself, on the line a lot. You know, and like for one thing, Yogi. See, when they killed George, the next person they went after was Yogi. Yogi had a trial going on in Soledad, so he was going between Soledad and Quentin, and all during that period of time, they would isolate him. He was being beaten. Like when they bring him back from Soledad to Quentin, they would isolate him from us. They would put him on the second tier of the AC. At that time, they didn't have anybody on the second tier because they had moved us off the second tier, moved us down to the first tier, and then they did a whole bunch of reconstruction on other AC, put more cages and more bars up, and so when they moved us down to the first tier, Yogi, the second tier was vacant because they moved everybody off of there. Death Row was still upstairs, and that's how we used to get our information. We'd pump out the toilets, and the people from Death Row would since they had TVs and stuff, would be giving us information. Uh, but they put Yogi under tremendous stress, and for a long time. I mean, we were helpless. We couldn't do anything for him. Every time they took him out of his cell to go to a legal visit or visit, they would beat him. He get back, they beat him, and it got to the point where I think he was refusing visits because he got tired of getting beat. You know, but then at some point, when we got fed up with it and got our nerve back, you know, and when we start getting visits, we start taking off on them, so we start fighting them, so you can't just get away with this. Every chance we got to attack, we attack, and then when this started occurring, then they backed off of it because they could see, they saw that you just can't beat us without any kind of repercussions. So they tended to back back off of
I'm sure that's right.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And and like I say, Yogi's always been a target, but they went after him specifically because, like I said, they felt, and for us, because we were like isolated right there, they were trying to break us. And their thinking was if they break Yogi, they could break us. But,
Ah,
but no, it it wasn't working,
right.
you know, and, it's like, when I heard about this, there's, there's a lot of places they could have sent him other than Folsom. You know, they, that's a horrible place. You know, I mean, he
Yeah.
had been there before. I mean,
Yeah.
Folsom is just, it wasn't a place, if you're going to let somebody out on a yard who's trying to live in peace, it, was, it wasn't a place for that.
That was a setup.
It
I
was.
believe
I
it.
mean, it's different yards in Folsom a lot. Even before, even before Yogi went out on that yard, other yard, because I got a call from somebody. I don't want to mention their name because I don't want to jeopardize. And the yard they were on was on lockdown, and they were explaining to me that that they had an incident, one incident. They locked the pen down. They opened the pen back up, and then another racial incident, and they locked it down. So the yard that this friend of mine was on 2 weeks before this happened to Yogi, I had been aware of a lot of racial incidents on in New Folsom,
Right.
even though it may not have been public knowledge.
Right.
But if you were in contact with somebody that was in there, the pens were on lockdown.
Right.
You know,
Well, yeah. His mom and his daughter went up to visit him and discovered it was on
yeah,
lockdown, and you can't visit, so you just waste that long trip.
yeah. So there was a lot of stuff going on there. Yeah, and like you say, we know
I
it was
think
a
we have.
setup. They know it
See
was
here.
a setup.
Oh,
They think their hands
we have
are
five
clean.
minutes.
Yeah, they think their hands are clean because of the way that went down, but they ain't clean. We know, who's responsible.
Right.
And question now is, how are they going to be repaid?
Well,
And again, what is to be done to
well, I
demonstrate?
think I think that the very best way we can honor Ugo Lion Antonio Pinel, our Yogi Bear, our beautiful, wonderful warrior, is to unite. That's what he was about. And
Yeah,
Mary Radcliffe of the San Francisco Bayview um, wrote me an email to tell me that the date that they murdered Yogi, August 12th, was the same date 3 years earlier, August 12th, 2012, that end the hostilities, the agreement to end hostilities, was chartered by the Pelican Bay hunger strikers, and Ugo Pinel was one of the initiators of the
hmm
original hunger strike, and was one of the initiators of of course, the agreement to end hostilities, because he was always trying to end hostilities. He was love. If one word could describe Yogi Bear, it would be love. Just as George Jackson said, if there's one word to describe fascism, it would be reform. So I hope that people will stop the nonsense
yeah,
and come together, all ethnic groups.
yeah.
It's one
See,
human race, and the 99% are being screwed by the 1%, and we need to come together. And if you want to honor Yogi Bear, Ugo Pinel, stop being so prejudiced and speak up against it whenever you hear it.
See, this one thing about it. It's you want to end hostilities among the prisoners, but the hostilities between prisoners and the administrations still exist. So when I say somebody is going to have to be held accountable, I am talking about those administrators and prison guards who orchestrated Yogi's assassination.
I agree. They do
So
need to be held
let's be
accountable.
clear about when I say that somebody has to justice has to be served.
Exactly. David Johnson, we only have a minute left, so I was wondering if you would just say some last words and we'll sum it up.
It's like you mentioned earlier about Yogi singing, and I remember he used to when and he had a good voice. I used to like to hear him sing because for a long time, that's the only entertainment we had was our voices, and he used to sing Sly Stone.
And and
It's a family
we're
affair.
out. We're out. I heard a wonderful recording of him singing just recently.
Yeah.
Thank you, viewers, for tuning in to Freedom is a Constant Struggle. Thanks Sydney Matterson for board opping. Saying thank Andrew Montoya and Ann Simmons and everyone who helped. Hans Bennett, a shout out. And thank you. And please continue to stand up for what's right. We must fall on our enemies, the enemies of all righteousness, with a ruthless, relentless will to win. History sweeps on. We must not let it escape our influence this time. That was George Jackson.